While sticking to nonverbal behaviors, we are going to talk about kinesics. Kinesics is the physicality of your body when you're communicating, really focusing on postures and gestures, especially. So, kinesics really shows that your posture expresses a dominant status. So you can see here this little clip from The Princess Diaries where the queen teaches Mia how to sit properly and have good posture because that posture expresses dominance and status. There are 5 categories of gestures that we're going to talk about: emblems, illustrators, affect displays, regulators, and adapters. And these are all nonverbal communication skills that we use in our communication daily. Something that I really encourage you to do is when you're watching TV this week, see if you can notice examples of kinesics while in the actors while you're watching, because it's very easily seen, and I feel like after you learn this, you'll come up with some examples on your own. So we're going to start with emblems. So emblems are substitutions for words, but only work in specific contexts. So we talked about earlier how if I want you to pick me up 2 things, but instead of saying the word 2, I raise 2 fingers. That is an example of a substitution for words. However, it's not universal. On the right of the screen, I have a bunch of emblems that we will know in our culture. However, in different cultures, different countries, some emblems that we use are very negative. For example, so I'm a big fan of Disney. I love going to Disney World. That's my favorite vacation spot. And I had a lot of friends that worked for Disney World while I was in college. And one thing that you'll notice no cast members in Disney World does is they don't point with one finger, because in certain cultures that is very rude. So they only point with 2 fingers together, so that way it's not a vulgar gesture. So there's lots of other stuff like that. Example, like the A-OK sign, that is something that we recognize in our culture as meaning something, but overseas people wouldn't really know what you're doing. Illustrators. So kinesics, illustrators, it basically complements, enhances, or substitutes for verbal messages. Sometimes verbal messages are inappropriate or can't be heard. But you can see all of these stick figures down here, different examples of what they would be illustrating and how they're communicating that point. Affect displays are nonverbal gestures, really focused on facial expressions that communicate emotions. You can see the girl in the top corner, very happy, excited. She has her thumbs up, which is an example of an emblem from our culture, but also her facial expressions and her overall body posture is really showing she's excited. You have the young woman in the bottom right corner with her hands on her hips. What do you think she's feeling? Definitely not as happy as the girl from above. We notice her hands are on her hips. Her face is a little upsetting looking. So her affect display is kind of showing that she's not happy. And then we have the picture in the bottom that shows one man with 2 different faces. And that facial expression can really change how he's feeling depending on what we're seeing. Regulators. So these are gestures that we use in communication daily to either, regulate the conversation and make sure you're taking turns. Also to show that we're paying attention. You have Oprah here giving an interview, shaking her head, nodding. Nodding usually shows that we're listening. And an absence of cues might trigger negative reactions. So if we're having a conversation and I just sit there and I'm just gazing right past you, what would you think? You would probably think I'm not really listening, I don't care, I'm not focusing on what's going on. So regulators are things that we use in communication to really show that we're being interested in something and kind of contributing to that. This is also really interesting because our textbook that we're using is very new. It was published in 2019. However, this is kind of already changing. As I read newer texts, a lot of times people say that, nodding can seem very artificial if you don't mean it. So it kind of really truly comes from within to show interest in what another person is saying, because just as easily as staring into the abyss, shaking your head and nodding can also seem very artificial and not genuine as well. Adapters. So we use adapters when we're nervous. Gestures can show that you're tense or that you're uncomfortable. Two of the big ones are tapping your foot, as Mickey's doing up there, and then twirling your hair. These are also things that we kind of look for in communication to tell how another person's feeling on the inside. Also, with public speaking, these are identifiers that, as your professor, I kind of look for to see how you're feeling, if you're feeling confident or not. Things such as, hunching over and not putting your shoulders back might show signs of nervousness. Twiddling your thumbs, not knowing where to put your hands, that restlessness, or twirling your hair. These are all adapters that, we use in situations where we're uncomfortable, but it's best if we can figure out how to mask or hide those so that our audience or the person we're communicating with doesn't see it. And we're going to talk a lot about that and how we can control that this semester. All right, so proxemics is basically like, what is your personal zone? When we're talking, we talked a lot about facial expressions, your body language. Another part of that is the physicality of where you are when you're talking to a person. So are you in their bubble? We have a clip from Friends. Someone on the subway licked my neck. Obviously, that is not okay. They were in that intimate zone, which is 0 to 18 inches from a person. And I'm guessing the person on the subway who licked him, they didn't have that relationship where it was okay to be in that intimate zone. So your textbook outlines what zones are kind of appropriate. So an intimate zone might only be a zone that you are comfortable with family, close friends, your partner. Personal zone is going to be, people that you socialize with. Social zone is going to be more what is kind of appropriate at work or gatherings. And a public zone would be more so if you're giving a speech or like that. This also varies among cultures. So these are the proxemic zones based on us in America, but it definitely differs from culture to culture. So really knowing where it is okay and where it's not okay to stand with someone, it's really based on your relationship and the environment and atmosphere which you're in. And next up, of course, we talk about environments. So environment is where the communication is taking place. And this is all going to influence the way you verbally communicate with someone and nonverbal. It very much shapes the communication context. And your nonverbal behaviors are going to change in according with the environment. So like I said, if you are, talking to someone that you work with, maybe you're at like a cocktail party for work or something, it would be very uncomfortable if they're in that intimate zone where you are almost touching while having a conversation. It would be more suited to the personal zone, to social zone, depending on the atmosphere and the environment which you're in. All right. So next we're going to talk, this goes within environment, but it's chronomics. This is the study of how time structures your interactions. So monochronic cultures are very concerned with being on time and maintaining a schedule. Western cultures in particularly. Polychronic cultures are there's less emphasis on keeping a tight schedule, more flexible. South America and the Mediterranean region are examples of this. So I want you to also think about, where do you think you fall into this? Which side would you see yourself more on? So I can definitely see the polychronic side. Like I said, I'm Italian. So when we have family gatherings, it's very unstructured. We say we'll have lunch at 1. If it doesn't happen till 2, it's okay. We're less structured and we're more emphasized on keeping a tight schedule. Me in my personal and professional life, I'm very much the monochronic side. I'm very concerned with being on time. If I'm not on time to something, I get nervous, I get anxious, I apologize profusely because I feel like, someone else, especially if my plans are with someone else, I want to be respectful of their time. This also changes with environment. For example, my partner would very much fall on the monochronic side when it comes to professional and work. He's going to maintain a schedule, he's going to be on time. But when it comes to personal life, very much falls in the polychronic side where there's no schedule. We get there when we get there. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to talk a little bit about facial expressions. So gestures can be hands, body, mainly hands. Your posture is another form of a gesture, but then facial expressions is really what is happening up on your face. So neutralization is the process of controlling your facial expressions to erase how numb you might really feel. And this is just having more of a blank canvas for a face. Masking means hiding an expression. If you are in a meeting and you hear something that you really are not happy with, but in the environment you're at, you can't react the way you want to. So you smile, you make a fake smile. That's masking. You feel one way, but you're going to show the other way. Intensification refers to using an expression that exaggerates how you feel about something. This I would agree with children especially. If you tell a child, it's time to go to school, and they roll on the floor, cry, they're making a very simple situation, which they might not be happy about, but very intensifying it. And de-intensification refers to reducing intensity of your facial expression. So you might be very angry at a coworker, but because of the environment you're in, you can't necessarily show how angry you are. You're not masking it, or you're not keeping it neutralizing. You're showing how you're feeling, but instead of rolling and screaming on the floor, you are managing it in a different way. And of course, in today's digital age, we'd be amiss not to mention emojis. That is basically a textual facial expression. Emoji actually means picture letter in Japanese. Eye behavior is something very important as well. In the U.S. culture, we definitely base people on eye contact, and that's going to be our speaking tip of the week, so we'll get to that in a second. But also rolling your eyes, and it can very much give us a negative reaction. All right, last we're going to talk about vocalics, and this is how your voice sounds, because knowing how someone's voice sounds can definitely give us different cues. So for example, tone, I can say one thing, but if my tone doesn't sound honest, it can mean something else. Volume, we have to be able to hear you. Articulation, are you speaking clearly enough that we understand the words that you are saying? Pitch, that has to deal with how high or low your voice is, and that can mean different things. Your rate of speech, how fast are you talking? Are you talking so fast that I can't understand you, or are you talking too slow that my mind kind of wanders and I can't follow you? It's very important to find somewhere in the middle of that rate. And the use of silence. Silence is not a bad thing. We all need time to think and process, so including a moment for people to think is very helpful. All right, and I think this is the last one. We have haptics. This is the study of touch. The use of touch and how it is interpreted is always contextual. It means different depending on different cultures. So it's very important to know the rules and appropriateness of your culture of if touching is okay. Okay, we have one more. So physical appearance. This is the observable traits of your body and its accessories, self-representation, and the physical appearance. So we have these two men below. What do you think of the person on the bench? Most people would say he looks homeless. He has a lot of bags. He's not necessarily well dressed. Looks like he needs to shower and shave. And then I could say, look at the person over here. And what would you say about that? Well, he's in a suit, so he probably works. He's a businessman. We don't know anything else about them. We're just basing that on their physical appearance. So this kind of introduces us to why physical appearances are important. All right. So that wraps up. Sorry, I got a little fast towards the end. The screencast will cut me off at 15 minutes. So we just made it under there. But of course, let me know if you have any questions at all.